If you've spent most of your life in the West, your sense of normal food is shaped by supermarkets, refrigeration, and a fairly predictable set of ingredients. We're used to chicken without the head, fish without the eyes, and cuts of meat that arrive neatly separated from the animal they came from. But around the world, normal is a moving target. Different climates, different histories, and different resources create different food traditions. What feels shocking to one culture may be completely ordinary to another, eaten at family dinners, sold at street markets, or served at celebrations. Number 20. Durian. In the humid heat of Southeast Asia, Thailand, Malaysia, Indonesia, durian arrives like a medieval weapon, heavy, spiked, and unapologetic. If you were designing a fruit to discourage casual snacking, you'd start here. The smell is the legend, and it gets talked about the way weather gets talked about, unavoidable and strangely personal. Some describe it as sweet custard and caramel, with a richness that feels almost dairy-like. Others insist it's closer to onions and gym socks, having a disagreement in a small room. But where it grows naturally, durian is not a party trick. It's seasonal abundance turned into pride, traded and prized across regions for generations. In many places, families buy it the way others buy a special cake, and friends argue about the best variety with total sincerity. There, the aroma isn't a warning, it's a promise that something indulgent is about to happen. Number 19. Stinky tofu. In China and Taiwan, especially in the glow and bustle of night markets, stinky tofu announces itself before you ever see it. You'll be walking past stalls and suddenly realize the air has changed. Fermentation was historically a practical tool, preserving food and building deeper flavor, long before refrigeration made everything effortless. Over time, that practicality became preference, and preference became tradition. The tofu is fermented in brine, then fried until crisp, and served with pickled vegetables and sauces that cut through the richness. The punchline is this: once you actually taste it, the flavor is often more savory than scary. Funky, yes, but balanced. It's the culinary equivalent of a loud personality that turns out to be friendly. And if you grow up around it, the smell doesn't mean avoid. It means someone's cooking something good. Number 18. Natto. In Japan, natto sits quietly at breakfast tables like it's the most ordinary thing in the world. Until you stir it, and it becomes sticky, stringy, and determined to cling to your chopsticks like it has unfinished business. The first time you see it stretch, your brain may briefly consider whether food is meant to behave that way. Its roots lie in old fermentation practices that made protein last. Especially in home kitchens, where preservation wasn't trendy, it was necessary. Over generations, natto became a familiar morning staple, often mixed with soy sauce, mustard, and rice. To many, it's the taste of routine, simple, humble, and oddly satisfying. To the unprepared visitor, it's a reminder that texture can be as culturally specific as language. And once your palate adjusts, the strong opinions start to make sense. Because natto is not trying to be universally liked. Number 17. Century eggs. In China, preserved eggs, often nicknamed century eggs, are proof that patience can be an ingredient. Over weeks or months, the whites turn translucent and amber, while the yolks become dark and creamy, with a flavor that leans savory and complex. Open one, and it can look like something you found in a museum display case. Historically, alkaline curing was a practical method to extend shelf life and transform flavor, especially when fresh food wasn't always guaranteed. It's preservation, yes, but also refinement, because the goal isn't just to keep the egg, it's to change it. Served with congee or sliced alongside other dishes, it becomes familiar in purpose. Salty richness, a deep umami accent, something that makes a simple bowl feel complete. And for people raised with it, the appearance isn't off-putting. It's comforting, because it signals something traditional is on the table. Number 16. Escamoles. In Mexico, especially in central regions where agave thrives, escamoles have long been harvested from ant nests near agave roots. Long before modern food trends discovered edible insects, insect cuisine here was seasonal, practical, and deeply tied to indigenous tradition. When you live close to the land, you learn what it offers, and you learn how to turn it into something worth celebrating. Cooked gently with butter, garlic, herbs, and chilies, escamoles become delicate and nutty, sometimes compared to a soft scramble with a slightly mineral richness. Served in tacos with fresh salsa, they stop feeling like a dare and start feeling like a local speciality, because the flavors around them are familiar and welcoming. In other words, your brain may hesitate, but your mouth tends to understand quickly. And historically, that's the point. Food isn't just fuel, it's a relationship with place. Number 15. Fried tarantula. In parts of Cambodia, certain markets sell tarantulas as casually as other places sell chips. They sit piled in trays, dark and glossy, looking like something that escaped from a wildlife documentary and made a wrong turn into a fryer. In difficult times, people everywhere expand their diets to what the land provides, and over time, those survival choices can become tradition. What begins as "we can eat this" becomes "we do eat this," and eventually, "we like this." Fried until crisp and seasoned, the spider becomes mostly crunch, salt, and spice, more like a snack than a meal. The fear is visual. The experience is surprisingly straightforward. And for locals, it can be tied to memory, markets, family outings, the familiar smell of frying oil, and the comfort of something that has always been there. Number 14. Haggis. In Scotland, haggis is less a curiosity and more a declaration of thrift and identity. Traditionally, it uses sheep's offal mixed with oats, onions, fat and spices. Classic waste-nothing cooking. In rural life, this wasn't about daring anyone. It was about feeding people well with what you had, especially in a time when wasting edible parts was unthinkable. Over time, it became a symbol, something that says, "This is ours," whether you're eating it in a home kitchen or at a gathering. Today, it's tied to celebration, famously served at Burns Night, where tradition itself is part of the flavor. The description makes outsiders hesitate, but the taste is often familiar, savory, peppery, hearty, almost like a deeply seasoned meat and oat loaf. The surprise isn't that people eat it. The surprise is how quickly it stops feeling strange. Number 13. Lutefisk. In Norway and Sweden, and among Nordic families abroad, lutefisk appears most often around the holidays, an edible relic of winter life. It arrives at the table with a quiet confidence, even though its texture is the sort of thing that makes newcomers look twice. It begins as dried cod, rehydrated, treated with lye, then soaked again until it becomes tender and famously gelatinous. Historically, dried fish was essential winter protein, and lye treatment helped turn stockfish back into something you could serve at a table when fresh food was limited. In a colder world, preservation wasn't a hobby, it was a calendar. Served with butter, cream sauce, peas and potatoes, lutefisk becomes a vehicle for comfort and tradition. And the sides often tell you as much about the culture as the fish does. If you grew up with it, the wobble isn't alarming. It's nostalgia you can eat. Number 12. Tuna eyeballs. In Japan, where seafood culture runs deep and waste is treated as disrespect, tuna eyeballs can show up as a snack or appetizer. This is the logic of coastal cultures everywhere. If the sea provides, you learn to use what it gives you. It's part of a broader tradition. Use what's edible, honor the catch, and don't pretend the ocean delivers food in tidy, sanitized packages. Cooked properly, often simmered or steamed, an eyeball becomes rich and gelatinous, with a texture some compare to marrow or collagen-rich cuts. The shape is what shocks you because the mind has labelled eye as something that should never be on a plate. But in practice, it's simply another part of an animal, seasoned and served the way humans have always done, turning anatomy into cuisine with a little heat and a lot of cultural confidence. And once you see it through that lens, it stops being a dare and starts being what it really is, an expression of respect, thrift, and tradition. Number 11. Snake wine. In parts of China and Southeast Asia, snake wine sits in bottles like a story preserved in alcohol. It's often displayed openly, the snake coiled inside the glass, as if to make sure you understand exactly what you're being offered. Infusing animals in spirits has a long history in folk practices, tonics, rituals, and beliefs about vitality, resilience, and strength. Long before modern supplements and wellness branding, cultures used what they had, and powerful animals often became symbols of powerful outcomes. To outsiders, it can look like something you'd find in a back room with a warning label, but locally, it may be treated as traditional medicine in belief, a ceremonial drink, or simply a cultural curiosity offered on special occasions. Whatever you think of the claims, the practice makes one thing clear. Humans don't just consume flavors. We consume stories. Number 10. San Nakji. In South Korea, where coastal food culture prizes immediacy, San Nakji is a dramatic expression of freshness. This is the kind of dish that only makes sense when you live close to the sea, and the idea of fresh isn't a marketing term, it's a daily reality. Octopus is served so fresh that pieces can still wriggle due to nerve activity. Historically, many seaside cuisines developed around a simple idea. The closer the ocean is to your plate, the better the meal. Seasoned with sesame oil and seeds, it's chewy, bracing, and unforgettable. Half food, half adrenaline. And in the places where it's common, it's not framed as shock cuisine at all. It's framed as quality. Number 9. Shirako. In Japan, shirako appears in winter menus like a quiet, seasonal secret. It's often served in small portions, presented carefully, the way you present something you genuinely consider refined. Shirako is fish milt, often from cod. Historically, it fits the same logic as odd cuts everywhere. When you rely on the sea, you learn that different parts peak at different times, and some become prized. In cold months, when certain fish are at their best, shirako becomes a seasonal delicacy, not because it's shocking, but because it's fleeting. Prepared gently, it can be creamy and delicate, almost custard-like in texture. The mind tends to protest louder than the palate, and that's the recurring lesson. Strange is often just not what I was taught. Number 8. Fugu. In Japan, fugu is famous for an unusual reason. It's not just a meal, it's a controlled risk. It occupies a cultural space where skill, tradition, and trust all sit down at the table together. Certain pufferfish organs can contain a powerful toxin, and historically, people learned, sometimes the hard way, that this fish requires expertise. Over time, the response wasn't to abandon the dish, but to master it, building strict training and licensing so the danger is managed with precision. The flavor itself is subtle, clean, almost understated, which only makes the psychology more interesting. The thrill doesn't come from taste. It comes from the knowledge that taste is possible because someone knew exactly what they were doing. In that sense, Fugu is cuisine as craftsmanship, a reminder that humans don't just eat food, we eat mastery. Number 7. Kopi Luwak. In Indonesia, especially Sumatra and Java, kopi luwak became famous for a process that sounds like a joke and behaves like a luxury product. It begins in the forest with a civet, a small mammal with a surprisingly picky palate for ripe coffee cherries. The animal eats the fruit, the beans pass through, and afterward they're collected, cleaned, and roasted. The origin story is often linked to plantation-era coffee culture, when locals observed civets selecting the best cherries and found a way to salvage beans they otherwise couldn't access. In other words, it began less as a novelty and more as an improvisation, turning what was available into something valuable. Later, the world discovered it and did what the world does, made it expensive, mysterious, and faintly ridiculous. Whether it's worth the price is almost beside the point. Kopi Luwak shows how quickly a strange process becomes refined when scarcity and story are attached to it. Number 6. Bird's nest soup. In China and across parts of Southeast Asia, bird's nest soup sits firmly in the category of prestige, served not because it's shocking, but because it's prized. The nests come from swiftlets, birds that build using solidified saliva, creating delicate structures that cling to cave walls. Historically, harvesting these nests required risk, labor, and access, which helped turn them into symbols of wealth and status. In soup, the nest dissolves into a silky, gelatinous texture, less about flavor fireworks and more about mouthfeel and tradition. To a Western mind, the phrase saliva nest can be a moment. But in context, it's simply a luxury ingredient, like truffles or caviar, rare, culturally meaningful, and served on occasions where the point is to honor guests. This is a theme you'll see again and again. When a culture values an ingredient, the origin becomes less important than the ritual around it. Number 5. Dinuguan. In the Philippines, dinuguan is comfort food, served in homes, eaten with rice, and remembered the way people remember the food of childhood. It's pork stewed with blood, vinegar, garlic and spices, creating a dish that's rich, tangy, and deeply savory. Historically, it reflects a practical, no-waste approach to cooking. When an animal is slaughtered, every edible part matters, and blood, highly nutritious, doesn't keep for long unless it's cooked into something stable. Vinegar plays a key role here, not only for flavor, but for practicality, cutting richness and helping preserve the dish in warmer climates. To Western audiences, blood stew can sound like a dare. To the people who grew up with it, it's Tuesday. And that's worth remembering. For most of human history, the unusual thing wasn't eating the whole animal. The unusual thing is our modern ability to pretend the animal was never there. Number 4. Rocky Mountain oysters. In the ranching regions of the American West, and in pockets of Canada, Rocky Mountain oysters are a frontier joke that became a menu item. They show up at cookouts, festivals and bars with a grin attached, as if the dish itself knows exactly what it's doing. They're bull testicles, sliced, breaded and fried. Historically, this is the same logic you'll find worldwide. If you raise and process animals, you don't waste what can be eaten. Practicality becomes tradition, and tradition eventually becomes a story you tell new people. Once they're fried and served with sauce, the experience becomes oddly familiar, crunchy, salty, and suspiciously easy to keep eating. The shock is mostly semantic. And in a list like this, it's a helpful reminder. Sometimes strange isn't about geography at all. Sometimes it's just about whether your culture admits what it's eating. Number 3. Hakkarl. In Iceland, hakkarl tastes like a harsh environment refusing to compromise. This is an island shaped by wind, cold, and long, dark seasons. exactly the kind of place where preservation isn't optional. Greenland shark can be harmful if eaten fresh, so Icelanders developed a curing and fermentation process, then hung the meat to dry. Historically, this is necessity turned into tradition, taking a difficult resource and engineering it into food. The smell is famously ammonia-strong, sharp enough to make your eyes narrow before you even taste it. It's the kind of aroma that convinces your instincts you should negotiate. And yet, it persists. Often served at festivals and gatherings as a marker of heritage, it's not eaten because it's easy. It's eaten because it connects people to who they were and to what they endured. Number 2. Casu marzu. In Sardinia, a rugged Italian island with deep pastoral traditions, Casu marzu sits at the outer edge of what many outsiders consider cheese. Sardinia has long been shaped by shepherd culture, milk, fermentation, aging, and the quiet expertise of making food last. Casu marzu is a cheese that ferments further with the help of larvae, softening it and intensifying the flavor. Historically, this belongs to local, small-scale food culture. Families and rural communities pushing fermentation techniques farther than industrial standards tend to allow. And whether you see that as fascinating or horrifying often depends entirely on whether it's your tradition. For some, it's heritage, something older relatives remember, something local identity protects. For others, it's a hard boundary. Either way, Casu marzu forces an honest realization. Many foods we love are already controlled decay. This one simply refuses to hide what's happening. Number 1. Kiviak. In Greenland, among Inuit communities, kiviak is not novelty. It's engineering for survival in one of the planet's most unforgiving environments. When the land is frozen for long stretches and fresh food can be scarce, culture becomes a tool set for staying alive. Hundreds of small seabirds are packed into a sealskin, sealed and fermented for months under stones, then eaten during winter and at celebrations. Historically, this is what cuisine looks like when the environment is brutally honest. You preserve protein through long seasons using the materials you have, and you do it with methods proven across generations. To a Western audience, the description can sound almost mythical. But in context, it's ingenuity, food science without lab coats, preservation without refrigeration, tradition as infrastructure. And perhaps that is the most important perspective shift of all. The strangest foods are often the ones most closely tied to survival, community, and place. They're not meant to impress outsiders. They're meant to feed people. And there we have it. 20 foods that prove strange is often just another word for unfamiliar. Across the world, people have taken what their environment provided, solved real problems with preservation and creativity, and turned those solutions into tradition. If you enjoyed this tour of the planet's more surprising meals, subscribe for more list-style documentaries like this one. There are endless corners of the world where the menu tells a story, and we've only just begun. If you want a part 2, tell me in the comments which item you'd try first, and which one you'd avoid at all costs. Until next time.